What a gift. What an amazing gift just to bring it up. Because what a lot of people do when somebody dies is they do the Minnesota nice thing. We can't talk about that. Abortion, politics, death, taxes, whatever you're not allowed to talk about. How much do you make? That's rude. Oh, we don't want to be rude. Oh, the hell with it. Be rude. Be blunt, but and fumble through it. Fumble through it. You don't have to say the perfect thing. You don't have, if somebody starts crying, that's an amazing gift that you're just there to be there for them.
Hello, and welcome to the Art of Living Well podcast. I'm Stephanie May Potter, and I'm here with my co-host, Marnie Dotches-Marmette.
We created the Art of Living Well podcast to empower you to live your happiest, healthiest, and most authentic life. Each week, we will bring you inspiring and motivating conversations covering health and wellness topics, including fitness, mindset, food, travel, product reviews, and strategies from a variety of experts, including our own bank of knowledge.
We are excited to educate, motivate, and inspire you to change the way you perceive health and discover your art of living well. Get ready to feel inspired.
Hello, and welcome to episode 110 of the Art of Living Well podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Jed Kaufman. Dr. Kaufman is a general and trauma surgeon in Olympia, Washington. In our conversation today, we really dive into the topic of death, which is something we've never discussed on our podcast before. We talk about how to discuss death and loss with less fear, how to talk about a good, respectful death, and just how to get more comfortable with the subject and even with being around people who have recently experienced a loss. And we also talk about what are the things that are really important in life. Jed shares so much wisdom in this episode, and he shares a lot about his own personal life, and he talks about how you can have a relationship with a person that's passed away. It's just a different relationship. He also dives into how you can talk to kids about death. And we hope that you gain some nuggets from this important conversation today.
But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Thrive Chiropractic. I was first introduced to Thrive Chiropractic over 5 years ago for kinesiology-based food sensitivity testing. I was so amazed by this non-invasive and inexpensive technique that I took my son to have testing done, which confirmed some of his food sensitivities. Both my son and I now have regular tune-ups, and even my leery husband has felt the immense benefits from receiving chiropractic care, including cupping.
With over 25 years of clinical experience, the doctors at Thrive Chiropractic, located in Minnetonka, Minnesota, combine their passion for wellness with a strong expertise in effective treatment approaches. When you first come to Thrive Chiropractic, the doctors are focused on helping you feel better as soon as possible, and they recognize that one type of treatment or technique does not work for everyone. Your comprehensive exam, personal goals, and individual concerns help the doctors tailor your custom treatment plan for maximum results. Thrive Chiropractic's integrative approach offers holistic and effective healthcare with a full spectrum of complementary products and services, including acupuncture, massage, food sensitivity testing, CBD, and premium supplements.
As a special offer, Thrive Chiropractic would like to invite listeners of our podcast to experience the gift of health with a $25 new patient visit, which includes the initial consultation, a comprehensive exam, any necessary x-rays, and first adjustments. Simply visit the website at www.thrivechiromn.com or call 952-746-5612 and reference the Art of Living Well podcast. When you're seeking effective, non-invasive treatment approaches to support your health goals, let Thrive Chiropractic be your partner in wellness. Call or book online today.
Hi, Jed. We are so excited to have you on our podcast today. We were put in touch with you by our good friend, Betsy Weiner. And I also know your sister-in-law, Jessica, from my old camp days, which is so crazy. What a small world we live in. Everyone's interconnected. I know we were just chatting a few minutes ago, and we know tons and tons of people in common. So I'm always amazed at what a small world it is.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone has a story, and we would love for you to share your journey of how you became a surgeon, and after practicing medicine for 20 plus years, eventually helping people, discuss death and loss.
Yeah. So, when I was in undergraduate down in Drake University in Iowa, which is its own story, a little bit how I got there, I was, of course, on the path to becoming another Jewish attorney. And why that is, I have no idea. But at this point, but I then started doing some philanthropic work with some homes for kids who are needing extra care, special needs kids, and then looked into working at a hospice, which is also tied into today's talk, and realized I didn't want to be an attorney. Nothing against attorneys, but I thought I better do something that's a little less desk oriented and a little more hands-on oriented. And so I did all my prereqs and then went to medical school a couple of years later at the University of Minnesota. And while there, I saw my first person die, which was interesting, and learned that I wanted to be a surgeon because probably due to ADD, but I can focus on things, and I'll admit it. It's a lot of surgeons have that, where I can focus intently really well for hours if I have to. But talking to somebody in clinic wasn't my strong suit. Needless to say, I learned to love clinic as well, because I really love talking to people, and my patients. I really adore my patients. So I went to medical school, became a surgeon in Seattle, and started working, trained at a trauma center, a major trauma center, and then started working as a surgeon in Seattle.
Wow. So how can you talk a little bit about the evolution, like through those 20 years that you've been working, how you eventually started helping people with death and loss, and maybe a little bit of background as to why this topic is not openly discussed, within the medical community in a positive light, where like we were chatting earlier about how it's avoiding death, which is obviously, of course, the goal, but all of us at some point are going to leave this current earth that we're living on. Can you just dive into that a little bit more?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, what I noticed as there were many different types of deaths that people were experiencing when I was either their doctor or as a resident or in the ICU, from, the group of people who had head trauma, who were recovering slowly, young people who had actually had a great potential to recover and have a meaningful life, to a lot of people who were just, in my opinion, we were prolonging their death. We were no longer providing a quality of life or even a length of life. It was just that nobody could make a decision to allow them to pass away. And a lot of this has to do with technology. 50 or 100 years ago, when there wasn't really ventilators and there weren't the antibiotics that we have and the interventional that we have, even non-surgical interventions like cardiac stents or things that are surgery but not quite, people would die and we didn't really have a choice. Now we have this big choice that overarches everything that surgeons and other doctors do. Which we can, but should we? Yes, of course, I can operate on anybody, but should I operate on anybody is a much harder question to answer. And it has a lot to do with, I think, are we going to make a difference? And that's me, that's my opinion. Some doctors feel that death should be avoided at all costs. And that journey for me was really born out of seeing a lot of people die what I would call, and this is my opinion, again, I don't pretend to speak for everybody, but a bad death. And when I say a bad death, I don't mean that they were bad or they did something wrong, but that they didn't die with the respect or the ritual or the honesty with their families about what was happening, and they died either being coded with CPR at the age of 80 or 90, or they died after we put them through literally so many different operations and iterations of medicine that it was hard to recognize them as a human body, not as a spirit, but as a human body at that point. There was tubes and lines and everything. So that avoidance, like you brought up, Stephanie, very importantly, of talking about death, that avoidance of just dealing with our own mortality, like you brought up as well, which is great. That avoidance of understanding what they believe in the afterlife, because this idea of heaven and hell doesn't really jive with a lot of people. And as a Jewish person, it doesn't really jive with me too much. That avoidance of talking about scary things, about loss on so many levels, really has hamstrung the Western societies to talk about what is a scary thing for people. If there's a shark in the water, you don't go in the water because you don't want to get eaten. But that's not inevitable, right? Death is coming for everybody. And the more we just open up that conversation, and the less scary it is, and the more beautiful it can be. I mean, it doesn't have to be scary. It can be sad. It can be horribly sad. It can be a big mourning. But it can also be a ritual like the Native Americans, Indian people do, East Indian people as well. Buddhists have different rituals. So many places have different rituals about the beauty of death with mourning. So that's what I'm hoping that the United States and our Western society will start to move towards.
Well, it's so interesting that we're talking about this because I know of a few people right now that are either have older parents who are to the point where they're not living the dignified life that they would want to live. And maybe they have dementia or they have some sort of, mental brain dysfunction where they don't even know what's happening. And it's really hard because, maybe their body is working fine, but the quality of life is not there because the brain is not functioning. And then I also know a few people who have parents where their bodies are giving out because of cancer or whatever reason. And they're going, to the ends of the earth, trying to do everything to eradicate a cancer that probably can't be eradicated at this point. And the quality of life is terrible. And it just makes me think about, how do you spend those end of life days, in peace, or I don't know. It is a really interesting topic.
Well, your two examples are perfect, Marnie. I mean, they really are. It's when has the body given out and the mind is sharp, to me, is a far more difficult thing for a lot of people to understand. But the beauty of that situation is, of course, the person can still help us make decisions. And that's a really great thing. What I'm hoping to, by this conversation and with with you guys asking questions and a good conversation, talk about how do we bring about those discussions when we're 50 or 40 or 30, or with our kids or with our parents before that we get to that point. The parent who's has dementia and then he still has a body that's actively living. Actually, I take that back. It's also a very difficult situation because you don't just put them in a recliner in the back and come back. The coyotes have had their take. It's not. That sounds terrible, but it's true. What do? You can't just put them out in the back 40, right? And so how to allow people to end life with dignity is so important. And what dignity is really up for grabs. Really, that's not my choice.
And there's there's all these legal ramifications too.
Absolutely.
Like I say to my husband all the time, like if I'm ever, where I'm not living the life I would want to be living, please kill me. And I know that sounds horrible, but like,
that's great.
Those are my wishes.
I agree. And my whole thing is I don't want to burden someone else. Like I want them to live their life too, because the stress that a caregiver goes through for years and years when they're caring for a loved one who's in the situations that we're talking about, whether it's their body's gone or their mind is gone, that takes a toll on that individual and impacts their quality of life for years to come. And I've seen that happen. So I think these are such good conversations. Like, how does someone start having this dialogue? Like, are there even, I don't want to say programs, but for lack of a better word, because in the Western society, we don't have these rituals, like you mentioned, that happen in other cultures around the country yet, right? How does someone kind of take control? Because, the podcast is all about finding your art of living well. And part of living it's a circle of life. Part of life is that circle, right? And so we have to start to think about, at some point, we're all going to exit, regardless of what you believe happens after. It doesn't matter. Your physical body is going to leave this earth. And so how can someone begin to have a conversation and to know like what resources out there? Marnie mentioned legal considerations, all those things.
Well, yeah, I can talk to about those too, but I think that's a great transition to what do you do now so you can live a good life, so you don't have this sort of dread of, oh my God, my mom's got Parkinson's, which my mom does, and I went and visited her yesterday, but she's in a home. What do you do when you realize, oh, I have a child who is injured or who was born with a brain injury or cerebral palsy or has cystic fibrosis? I mean, these are conversations. How do you bring that up? And I think that if you look online, and I have done this, there are a lot of places you can talk about who can give you information about how to talk to children about death, which is a big one. Meeting kids where they're at emotionally and with the verbiage that works for them, which is not the big words at all, but asking lots of questions to a child, to talking with parents about making sure they have a living will, which I'm a huge fan of, making sure they have this thing, it's called a post, I don't even know what it means, PLLST anymore, post something legal document that tells people what you want. And whether you want to be full code or not. And with my mom, I've had all those discussions. She's not full code. If she passes, she passes. We know what to do with her body. Those are things that are hard conversations. What I've noticed is that when people have loss in this country, we're polite. And I hate when people are polite. Being appropriate is lovely, great. But when you're polite need to be polite so that you don't hurt somebody's sensibilities because you don't want to talk about something that's hard because you might ruin somebody's day. We sort of just sweep stuff under the proverbial carpet, and that carpet has a lot of stuff under it.
Will you like give an example of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. So, and this is an example that just happened. So Deborah, as you guys know, in the podcast, we can talk about this more. Her son died in 2019, end of 2019, from an accidental fentanyl overdose in our basement. And that was, a really big, important deal. And my son, Wyatt, who's a wonderful kid, who's, now 15, isn't sure how to talk to Deborah about it. So what he says is, I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to bring up something that's hard to talk about. And Deborah, on the other hand, wants to talk about Gabe with anybody because it means that Gabe still has a presence in everybody's lives, that they haven't forgotten him, that he was part of their lives. She loves to talk about Gabe, and she has a different relationship with her son now, but she still has one. That's the beauty of what Deborah, and I've learned a lot about this through Deborah, who's a remarkable person, to actually, it's okay to have a different relationship with the person who's gone, but still have a relationship with them. It doesn't mean that they're gone and out of your life. It doesn't mean that you no longer have a parent or a brother or a son or a daughter. It means that relationship has transitioned to one of a non-physical body. But in some places, you don't want to remind the person, and oh my God, don't bring that up, or how could you? We have the same thing with abortion and the same thing with other, cancer. Don't say the cancer word, don't say the C word. Oh my God. And with my patients, I bring it up immediately because they're all thinking it. If there's a question about whether they might have cancer, and every patient I've talked to has said, thank you for bringing that up. I was wondering, and nobody will talk to me about it. Can't talk about death.
Well, sorry, I was just going to say what you're describing reminds me a little bit of that, Minnesota nice, like where
Absolutely.
People don't, I'm very
I
much
thought
like,
the same thing.
like you, Jed, where like, say it like it is. Like, just be real and raw. And, if someone's approaching Deborah or another person that has had loss, like typically I would say most people want that, raw honesty and compassion and whatever.
Without drama, 100%. Blunt but kind is what I try to do in medical practice.
Yeah, blunt but kind. I like it.
I like that.
Yes, me too.
And the other thing I always try and have is what's called benevolent detachment. And so that's a Buddhist sort of thing of being detached from an outcome or being detached from the emotion. And emotion isn't bad, but emotion is typically drama. Whereas, oh my God, the hand on the head, and that's okay to have for a moment or two or three or a month. But then you have to realize benevolent detachment means I can still be solid for somebody without getting in the muck and mire with them. Meaning when Deborah's mourning or when I'm mourning, I can be solid for them and observe it, but I don't have to drop my soul and my body down to that level so that I'm suddenly unable to help or unable to be supportive. So, and that's what you have to have as a surgeon. I have to go from a patient potentially having a life-threatening injury to talking to somebody about an inguinal hernia. And if you bring all that energy to those two people, you're going to show up, looking quite disheveled and quite, oh my God, where is this person? So it isn't detachment in the way that we're like, where we don't feel. It's detachment where we allow ourselves to observe. And that's another thing that we don't do well, I think, is this art of observation is so important when you're talking about difficult things, and the art of listening. And, those are things that doctors really don't do well. They do well at shutting down so they don't have to feel, and then they don't listen. They interrupt people within 5 seconds or 10 seconds, or there's been studies about that.
Yeah,
So
I agree with you. And I would say like surgeons, especially, right, are kind of known to be like what you're saying, like detached and cold. And it's interesting to hear it from your perspective, where like in one moment you may be dealing with a tumor and in another moment you're dealing with a cyst or, two very different things. And I can see where you really need to get your emotional energy under wraps so that you can manage that. So I like that you're sharing that, because I never thought about it from the surgeon's perspective. I'm always thinking of it from the patient's perspective.
I go from opening a chest in the ER or taking out somebody's spleen. Literally, I did this last week, to having to talk to somebody about cancer. And if you lose a patient, and then you have to go talk to another patient who's expecting this, idea of a surgeon to come and talk with you, you bring that energy and you have to learn how to adjust that. Not to put it in a box and put it on a shelf. That's sort of a thing that we all do, or a lot of people do, to not deal with things. I'm not going to deal with that now. I put it away. That's okay. At times, you got to bring it back out, or it. What I've found is if you don't deal with the things that are coming at you or you're involved with, you oftentimes end up, they come out what I call sideways. They come out sideways in a way that we don't want. So, that's where the guy comes home from the classic, the guy comes home from work and kicks the dog and yells at the kids because he had a bad day at work. Like, okay, that's a classic sort of picture we have in our head, but that's not okay. So from a surgeon standpoint, I have noticed that a lot of surgeons, the reputation is spot on. What you said, Marnie, is they're cold, and people say, I'd rather have a jerk for a surgeon who's great in the operating room, but is a jerk. Those things are not, aren't separate things. You can have a good surgeon who's also can talk to humans. It's just unusual, what I found. I'm not tooting my own horn, but my friends told me I should have become a pediatrician because I'm good with parents. So I took that as a compliment. I don't think they meant it because I couldn't, because I had all thumbs. Hopefully that's not how they meant it. But the other aspect is humor. For me, humor is my defense mechanism. And so what I've found is that people love when you don't use big words and you just talk real to people. And you don't talk the same to the logger who comes in with 50 pack you're smoking and hands that could crush you and a baseball hat on that says I love Trump or I love guns. You don't talk to the same person, to the Edina housewife or house husband or the gay couple who comes in with concerns and they're both bankers. These are all stereotypes, but you learn how to read the room and how to talk about loss with each of them in a different way. And a lot of doctors don't understand. You got to read the room, and you meet people where they're at. Not everybody's ready to talk about it. Okay, I'm going to observe that.
And I really think that's great advice for any profession, any person in general in life. I like that. You got to read the room and you have to meet people where they're at.
Yes. And two other things I thought you said that were interesting: the art of listening and the art of observation. Both of those points to what Marnie said are just good principles that we can all be incorporating into our life. I don't think in general, as a society, we don't do enough listening, right?
Yeah, you got to let people finish their conversation or their statement I was actually in counseling with my ex-wife now, who the counselor said, if you don't wait for that race car to come to a complete stop when somebody's talking, and then so you can walk around and read the sponsors on the other side of the race car, you don't know what they're going to say. So let people come to the end of their statement before you get reactive and enter. And the other thing is, my mom used to drive me crazy. I mean, we all have moms or dads that used to drive us crazy. My mom was quite possibly borderline. We don't know, something. I don't get driven crazy by her at all anymore because I don't get in the ring with her. I don't allow myself to get dramatic. She says something that's completely reactive, and I go, wonder what's going on from my mom. If I can do that with my mom, who is really hard to do with because I was raised by her, right? I'm not objective. How much better of a listener am I going to be if I can do that with my friends, with my patients, with my loved ones, where I just, a kid comes down who's 10 years old, who's pissed off. Okay, hungry, tired, something happened at school, but I'm going to let them tell me or not. I may not be able to fix it. That's the hard part for doctors, is we're so used to fixing things. We have to remember that death isn't something that needs to be fixed. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be owned. It needs to be held. It needs to be faced, but it doesn't have to be avoided or fixed. And let me also caveat that, if somebody comes in with a spleen injury, I want to try and save their life. That's not the point. This is a talk about more of a death talk in general. Just to make sure I bring it up because I'll forget, but some doctors and a lot of doctors feel that there's a slippery slope, that if we allow doctor-assisted suicide, if we allow that conversation of letting somebody die, that, patients will have no faith in us, that they think they'll show up at the hospital and be put to sleep or be allowed to die. And that's been proven completely bunk, completely baloney. Patients don't want to be kept alive, like what Marnie said, past a quality of life. They don't want to be preserved beyond. They don't want to be burdens to their loved ones. And the more we talk about it, the better healthcare gets, not the worse. So I feel very strongly about that.
This is such a fascinating conversation.
It is, and I think it's going to spark so much discussion, I hope, with our listeners, and just really to think about some of these conversations that they can be having now. It's not really, it's not really too early or too soon to be having these conversations. Let's not wait until we're on our deathbed, right?
Ever. My daughter said to me when her grandfather died, and then my mom is now going through the process of having an end of life. I said, you want to talk to Grandma Joyce, my mom? And she said, why? She's just going to leave me like Pop did. Like, right? Like, I have to observe Ruby is pissed off that her grandpa's dead. But how do I get Ruby, who doesn't want to talk about anything with me right now, because she's 13, just her, right? To talk about and open up. And so I just have to be present, because if I push it, she pushes me away. So I just have to say, okay, whenever you're ready to talk about it, I'm here. And she knows that. So that's hard for me because I'm an active dad,
Yeah.
But it's hard for me. It ain't about me. None of this is about me.
Right. It's hard to remember that as parents though, right? Like, because I mean, you said a lot of doctors want to be fixers. I feel like I'm that type of personality where I'm a fixer and I want to fix everything, and you can't. I mean, it's just not possible.
Or desirable.
Or exactly. Or desirable.
If you learn about stuff the way I learned about stuff, which is when things went sideways. I can still remember when I had a lawn business and I was 13 in St. Louis Park, and I went into somebody's house to use the bathroom and the alarm went off and the police showed up. Like it was yesterday. Okay, I messed up, right? And the police were great and I didn't get in trouble. I don't remember any of the other lawns that I mowed, just that one, right? So we remember when we don't do the right thing and we have repercussions, and it's a great learning experience. And so my cycle of life thing, to come back to what Stephanie said, which is really brilliant, is that the best part about our lives is we can repeat all these things over and over until we kind of get them right, or we evolve. And evolution is really uncomfortable for people. Who wants to be comfortable? I mean, comfortable is a down comforter, yes, on a Sunday morning when you don't have to get up and That's different. I mean, comfortable, like where we can kind of just go on autopilot and don't evolve as people. And that's why this conversation about death for this country and for our Western society, I think, is so important, because people, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to face something that's so scary. But how great it is that when you face it, the art of living well, suddenly there's not that weight on your shoulders of a dying parent or your own death, which is really what it's about in a lot of people. They just don't want to face their own death.
Yes. So this is so much good. So such great insight. So we'd love, Jed, to pivot a little bit. I know you mentioned the loss of your wife's son. And this is, a topic we'd like to dive in a little bit more, if this is okay. And maybe if you can talk about Gabe a little bit. I know he was thought he was taking Oxycontin to try to help him sleep. And then he was given this, street drug called M30. Can you share a little bit about this story? Because I think this is something that's really the last several years, right? Been kind of a hot topic, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you brought it up. So, so just a little history. So Gabe was and is 17 at the age that he passed away. He was a straight A student in high school. He was actually in a junior college program, so he was taking most of his classes at a community college, which a lot of high schools do. He was hoping to go on to be in the finance or accounting career, and he was a hilarious, fun, good-looking kid. I can share a picture if you guys would like for the website, but whatever works I'm happy with. And he had anxiety, and he had issues of anxiety. And so one of the things that is hard for young men, but also young women, this is not a gender specific, but boys in general don't talk about their feelings. The classic football team or sports team where, you tough it out and don't be a wuss. And, then they feminize in a negative way, oh, you're being a girl. Well, we all should be more like girls because we all ought to talk about our feelings, to use a stereotype. And there are women who don't want to talk about their feelings either. So this is just from my point of view. But Gabe was one of those kids who, when he had a big project due at school, he would get very anxious. Even though as a surgeon and a physician and a doctor and a parent who's now almost fit but now 50, I could see that wasn't something to get upset about, except in his world that was the most important thing. Meaning I could see it as well. So you don't get a great grade, you're going to grow up and be a wonderful kid. But he would get really stressed out. So we had to work with him on how to handle that. And he was seeing a counselor. But he also had, I think, some addiction issues. He was a kid who pushed some boundaries with what he tried and what he did. But we didn't think he was ever using narcotics. And so he went off with one of his friends and bought some oxycodone or Oxycontin on the street. And it was what's called an M30. It was a fake pill, which they're everywhere now, just so you're aware. And it was ground up probably in a coffee grinder. And then they press these pills, anywhere that you can get a press, which is you could get them online for $150. And so what happens is you get a pill that's not professionally dispensed. So you get big chunks of fentanyl in one pill and none in the other. And fentanyl is a drug that's extremely toxic, meaning it has huge side effects on your respiratory system. When used for colonoscopies, or used for sedation prior to putting somebody to sleep for surgery, it's a great drug because it's a very short half-life, meaning it's gone in a matter of 20 minutes, 15 minutes. So you can use it and then the person will wake up right away. So it's great for that. But it also has huge respiratory depression. So we were out of town actually, and we had an adult staying with us. And he snorted some of this and clearly got more than he should have, and he died. He wasn't trying to kill himself. That's what people oftentimes ask, which is also a great conversation about suicide, which we can talk about, but that wasn't what he was trying to do. He'd recently gotten into an exercise program. He was applying to colleges. He had a big future. But the thing that struck me as so sad was that he was clearly dealing with anxiety and couldn't talk about it and didn't have a way to just say, I'm really feeling anxious, or I'm really feeling crappy, or I can't sleep. And what he didn't know is that we had Ativan in the house for him, cut into half doses, that if he had ever needed it, we told him we would get it for him, but we had already got it in the house. And so Ativan is a different type of drug that is used for anxiety acutely. It has addictive personalities, but it's not deadly in the doses we were going to give it. So we had already prepared for this, but Deborah and I are left with, well, what could we have done differently? Which is also a bit of a trap, but it's a good to go through that, to think about how can I talk to my children or other people about it. So Gabe died, and that was a big part of 2019, and then the pandemic hit, and so there was a lot of isolation as well for my children and for Deborah. So it was a really, we were in Spain actually when it happened, so we had that horrible trip home, and then we just evolved slowly through Gabe's death, and then through learning how to still keep Gabe alive in our hearts. And Deborah has done a remarkable job with that. So I'd let you talk to her about her feelings on that. But and I'd want you to if you'd like to. But that was a big deal as her partner, how to observe, how to mourn Gabe's loss, but not fall apart, because that wasn't my role. I needed to mourn Gabe's loss fully as my own loss, but also be there for Deborah. And it was a lot of learning, a lot of evolution went on this last couple of years. And then her dad died a year later, and so did her stepfather, within 3 months or 4 months of each other. So, how Deborah is still running around this world smiling and giggling and laughing and having a normal life, or whatever normal means, is remarkable to me. So I've learned a lot from her.
Well, first of all, I want to say that my heart goes out to you and Deborah and your entire family. I remember hearing about this when it happened and just feeling sick for a long time. I remember saying to Stephanie, like, we have to talk about this. Like, this is an issue, with these teens. And so I really appreciate you sharing the story, because like you said, the anxiety, that's a whole issue unto itself. And the fact that these kids can just go out and buy something and think it's one thing and it's something else, that's a whole other can of worms. And like, both those issues are so frightening as a parent. We both have teenagers, and, you let your teenagers out into the world, and it's frankly terrifying, especially when you hear this kind of thing. And then to hear how the two of you have moved, I don't want to say through the loss, because I have to believe that you're never gonna, that hole in your heart is going to be there forever. But the way that you're able to, like you said, have a different relationship with him in death is amazing. Amazing to me.
The whole. So what I want to really, and this is an important aspect of death and how we think about death. And this is less about us as a surgeon, although it helps me, having seen so many people pass away just from trauma or elderly sickness in the ICU, and talking with families about it. So it's not a foreign thing to me, which Deborah really appreciated, because I was always willing to talk about it, that although Deborah will never be the same, and she doesn't want to be the same, she is whole and she has healed. It doesn't mean she doesn't still mourn. It doesn't mean that she doesn't have days where she just misses Gabe. But this concept that now Deborah is broken, which you aren't saying, Marnie, I know that. You're just feeling it from a parent's point of view. But that is a common theme that she's heard. People say to her, I don't know how you do it. I couldn't have been so strong. Or how are you so functional right now? Which is almost like a way of saying, oh, didn't you love Gabe? And what she takes it to mean, what she now understands, is that people are saying, I haven't dealt with the idea that anybody in my life could have died. I don't know how you're handling this. Whereas most people, they do learn to handle it and they become whole people. Are they the same ever again? I wouldn't say they're the same, no. And why would you want to be? But certainly they're okay. They're good. Deborah has joy. She has love. She makes music. She has an album coming out. She's, laughs hilariously. and we giggle and dance to, stupid Prince songs that we still listen to in our, kitchen, like every Minnesota person should. And we have a really great life. And that is a concept for some people is impossible once a child dies. And because Deborah has made such an effort to have a relationship with Gabe, that's changed. She still talks to him occasionally. She goes down and sits in his room. We buy food that he likes. We give to charity because he loved to give homeless people charity. She made her give $5 to my sister does this now. Even if the person looks like they're going to shoot it up, you just give them the money, or you give them a pair of socks, or you give them your protein bar because you went to work out. And that's what Gabe stood for. So we do all those things as rituals because Gabe isn't gone. He's dead, but he isn't gone. And it's really important to address that.
I love all those nuggets that you just shared. It's a way to continue to celebrate the life of the person that's no longer here. And you're doing that through, part of them is now coming out through your actions, and you're embracing what they liked, the food, and just the, the charity, the philanthropic, aspect of what he used to do. I just think that's wonderful. And that I have to believe, and I don't know, I haven't been through this tragic experience that you and Deborah have been through, but that's got to make you help ease some of the pain and suffering a little bit, to know that you are carrying on and continuing the life of this person. And I love the fact that you're having this relationship just changes, and that she's talking to him. I mean, that just seems so healthy, such a healthy and holistic way to honor and celebrate and move on when someone in your life has passed.
That's perfect. That's spot on, Stephanie. I think that's a very, very wise way to interpret what I just said. And also to do it in your own way. I mean, so funny. Noah, Gabe's sister, Naomi, would sometimes come out of her room, and we would be talking, and something would come up, and she'd go, "Oh, thanks a lot, Gabe." Like, she yells at Gabe. Like, or we'll be like, "Oh, Gabe would like that. How you doing, Gabe?" And it's just, and we giggle. It's because Gabe was so funny. He was so hilarious. And he also had a pet snake, which was not my fan, but I didn't care. So we'd have to go down and feed his pet snake dead mice after he passed away. So Deborah would be like, "Thanks a lot, Gabe. Yeah, F you. I'm out here feeding a snake." And we'd both giggle because we go down and do it together. And we finally got the snake a new home. Amen. But, what are you going to do? I'm more of a dog and cat kind of person. But hey, he named his snake Wendy. I mean, how hilarious is that? We all know Wendy's in our Wendy Trustman and Wendy, this and that. It's like, oh my God, he named the snake Wendy. Like, that's not a snake name, but that was Gabe. So we laugh about all these things. And that's the best, is that it's actually become like an inside joke, but it's not a joke. It's just an inside knowing. Like, we're in this little, like, you don't know Gabe. We knew Gabe. But it's not like that. It's just hard to explain. So it's a really joyful interaction that we still have. And it's good, and you can, and other people have been, like, I won't say this, I didn't, but we express anger at Gabe. Like, he knew not to do this. He knew not to use narcotics. We talked about this with him. No pills, no powders. And if you're going to smoke pot, which you can't stop teenagers from doing, by the way, you don't get it from the street. You get it in our community in the store, or you know who got it, because there can be stuff in marijuana too. So, pills and powders will kill you. It's not don't get in the car and drive, after dark, you're going to die. Well, I drove last night, Mom, I didn't die. Don't go in the water, there's sharks. Well, I've been surfing for 10 years, never seen a shark. So then parents realize they're telling kids things that aren't true. This is actually true. It's unfortunate. So no pills, no powders, and call me anytime at night, I'll come pick you up. Yet I had the rule, and how many times did I call my parents when I was 16 or 17 and I was worried somebody was drinking and driving? You don't want to be that kid. But the more you talk about it with your kids, these hard things, sex, drugs, the more that they'll trust that you'll actually be there for them.
Absolutely.
That was a tangent. That was a total tangent.
No,
Sorry.
I think that's all great advice. And a lot of our listeners are in the thick of it with teenagers right now. We're both in the thick of it with teenagers. And it's good to hear that over and over again. And I just want to go back to say, from earlier, what I said about having that hole. What I was trying to say is I think I haven't experienced the loss of a child, but I would think that a piece of you feels like it's missing. I guess that's what I was trying to say.
No, you said it
Um,
beautifully. You're right. That's what people feel. That's what they think, that you're never going to be whole again. But you can be. It's just a different whole.
right.
You understand life and its preciousness and its fragility, and that your child is no longer physically with you. But and a lot of people stop there. They don't become whole anymore. So I think what you brought up was really important, Marnie. It wasn't I don't want to criticize it. I want to say, yes, that's how lots and lots of people feel. And that's where they end. They say, oh, I'm never going to be complete again. And some people just sit for the rest of their lives and carry that with them. Instead, you can change that ball of energy into a joyful one with loss, with mourning, a new sense of self wholeness that is never going to be the same.
Yeah. I
Never
know.
going to be the same.
I think you said that so beautifully, and it's something that I've never really thought about or considered, and I hope I never have to, frankly. But
We're supposed to outlive our kids, right?
yeah.
And the other thing that I think is a great way to talk about children is if you have pets. Pets are a setup unless you have a tortoise or a parrot that might outlive you, right? And I always think about this as funny, like, why would I want a pet that's going to put me in the ground? But maybe you love tortoises, so no judgment. But I've had dogs all my life, and when I've lost a pet and then mourn them, I still have pictures of my dogs up, and I don't, we don't want to forget our pets. Nobody says, oh, we can't talk about the fact that your dog died. But it's a great way for children to learn about loss. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, if you start with a hamster and go on to a dog or a cat, those animals are going to die. It's kind of a setup. And it's a really great way to teach kids and adults about what it's like to lose something. And then that can be a transition. Remember when 5 years ago our dog died, etc. Well, grandma is not doing well, or your father or your mother has got cancer, and we need to talk about the idea that they might die. But a lot of people just say, well, they're going to get better, don't worry. Kids know. They're so smart. Even little kids know. Why did you kill that mosquito, Dad? My son Levi asked me, and I had to think about it. Right? Well, nobody thinks about killing a mosquito, but he's really asking about death. That's a window to talk about it. Well, why do you ask, Levi? Tell me what you're thinking. And I'll let him, and then I'll meet him wherever he's at. But that can apply to adults too. I mean, you can meet them wherever they're at when they want to talk about it, but not talking about it is, I think, a way for us to shovel it under the carpet. And then we feel, okay, I don't have to deal with that right now.
Right.
Run at it. Run at that tough conversation. Make a plan. Talk about it with your kids and with your husband and with your parents. Set up a date. I mean, if it takes just putting it on the calendar, talk about death, and you can put a little skull and crossbones and with a smiley face. It doesn't have to be like, horribly morbid. I mean, we go to get chicken at Whole Foods. Something died so we could eat it, you can talk about it any way you want. There's no right answer. Not talking about it is the more common solution.
So that leads me into a question I have. Based on all your experiences, what advice do you have for others who want to support and be there for people that have lost someone and they don't know what to do?
That's a great question. Great question, Marnie. I'm glad you asked it. So that's the most common thing. So what people don't want to talk about with other people. So let's say, with me especially, people don't know what to say to me when they talk about Gabe. So because they're uncomfortable with it, they don't bring it up at all. And then they think I'm going to be uncomfortable with it. And that's what they sort of hide behind. Well, I can't talk about it because they might be uncomfortable and I don't really know what to say. That's okay. All we want to know, all people who've lost somebody want to know, is that you acknowledge that and that you're there for them. So you can start a conversation with, even by saying, hey, I don't know what to say, but I'm thinking about you and I love you and I am here for you. If you want to get a cup of coffee, if you want to talk about it, if you don't want to talk about it, if you want to go for a workout, if you want to go for a walk around the lakes, I don't know what to say. It makes me uncomfortable, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. What a gift. What an amazing gift just to bring it up, because what a lot of people do when somebody dies is they do the Minnesota nice thing. We can't talk about that. Abortion, politics, death, taxes, whatever you're not allowed to talk about. How much do you make? That's rude. Oh, we don't want to be rude. Oh, the hell with it. Be rude. Be blunt, but and fumble through it. Fumble through it. You don't have to say the perfect thing. You don't have, if somebody starts crying, that's an amazing gift that you're just there to be there for them. I mean, and this is on so many levels, right? Not just about death, about anything, and that's hard to talk about in life. A lot of women who I'm friends with and talk about, this is a similar thing about a miscarriage. There's so much shame about a miscarriage, which is actually a form of a death, right? So it comes to play. Whereas if you put 10 women in a room, on average, 6 to 10 of them, sometimes all of them have had a miscarriage. And it takes one person to go, I had a miscarriage or an abortion, unplanned or planned.
3 miscarriages. Yeah.
Right. And you feel loss. There's death relation. There's potential loss. You're a mother, so you have kids. You wonder what those kids would have been like. And if you go around the room, you will see just this glimmer, this glow of acceptance that go through these people that say, oh my God, I had one too. I never knew you did. We've been friends for 20 years, 30 years. We never talk about it. It's shame. It's uncomfortable. It's rude. It's private parts, so, and you're talking to a guy who deals with poop and pus and everything dirty about a human condition. Nothing bothers me. So I have a great window to talk about it, right? Because nothing bothers me. I can do a colonoscopy and eat a sloppy Joe at the same damn time. Don't care. Don't care. I know you don't have to put that on the podcast, but it's all human, right? It's all horribly, wonderfully human. Life is dirty and messy. If you don't know what to say, that's just fine. But don't say nothing. That's my only sort of hope for people, is just be there for somebody.
I love this advice so much. And at the heart of what you're saying, I think people just want to feel heard. And especially when you've gone through something so tragic as death, and everyone is going to grieve and mourn very differently. I think the best we can all do for someone, in this situation is just to create this safe space for them and be honest. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what to say. We all fumble over our words, and then it's awkward, and then we're Minnesota nice and all the things that you just said. Right. But just being there for a friend, a loved one, a coworker, whoever it is, and creating that space so that they can cry, vent, open up, whatever it is, let their emotions go, is really powerful. And it's all part of the healing process.
Absolutely. For both people,
for them. For both people, you're right.
And perfection is this idea that we all need to be perfect, and we're all getting stuff done, and liposuction, and then we all, hair stuff, and life isn't like that. There's no perfection. It's an endless, you'll never get there. Good luck. Enjoy whatever you do. I'm not, again, no judgment, because that doesn't work, but it doesn't exist. So I oftentimes say to Deborah, when we're having a not a tense discussion, but even when we're trying to evolve, I'll say, look, I don't know, forgive my words right now. I'm feeling something, I'm trying to, and she'll interpret it perfectly, because she knows my heart's in the right place, but I screw it up. I mean, I always screw up my words. I say something that's not what she means, and she's very forgiving in those moments. So you can even say that, I'm going to screw this up, but I wanted to tell you, I'm thinking of you, I love you, and if you want to talk about this, I'm here. If you just want to spend time, I'm here. That is a huge gift to both of you, because you will learn so much, and you'll be uncomfortable. Oh my God, so what? Observe yourself, right? That's the biggest thing. Observe yourself being uncomfortable, and just rise above and go, oh my God, I'm really uncomfortable. I'm really uncomfortable. I don't have to run. I don't have to have a dramatic experience. I don't have to yell or get angry, which is a classic male stereotype. I can just be uncomfortable. Sit with that. It's hard. It's really hard, but it's great when you sit with it and let it pass. So, and let it then evolve.
And I feel like that advice, you could almost offer, that same advice could be used to someone who doesn't have a loved one that's actually passed yet, but is, going through those harder end of life stages as well.
Absolutely.
Because that too is another one of those uncomfortable situations where do you acknowledge that it's maybe the end of life? Because sometimes, like you said, people don't acknowledge that. when it's obvious to everyone else that, okay, this is the end.
Yeah. And the Jewish tradition has sitting Shiva, which I think is brilliant, because then you just go and you bring food and you're just supposed to be. You're supposed to be there for them. You talk about it, you dance, you laugh, you cry, you drink some plum schnapps or whatever the heck that stuff was, terrible stuff we used to have at synagogue that all the kids tried to sneak.
Manischewitz.
Yeah, something like that. You're just there. And that's a really great tradition, but a lot of people don't have that, and Jews don't always do it. I think it's important, like you said, that anything that's hard, you can use this advice to just observe yourself, observe the person, and then be there. Death, abortion, loss of a loved one, loss of a house or a home, loss of a job. It could be applied to anything, really. It doesn't have to be just death,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Jed, this conversation has been so enlightening and really, really powerful. And it wasn't, we haven't talked about death in this way really at all on the podcast. And so I'm so glad that we're here sharing all this and all your wisdom and insight with our listeners today, because I think it's a topic we need to talk more about, right? So one final question we love to ask all of our guests is, what does the art of living well mean to you?
It's a great question, because it's so interpretable, and it's so, it's a great name for a conversation starter. To me, that's changed over my years. And a lot of people say, youth is wasted on the young, or whatever that saying is. I don't think that's quite true, but I wish I'd known now what I, didn't know then, or whatever the song is. And for me, I love the age I'm at. I love where I'm at. I love that I'm constantly evolving, and living well means bringing meaning into even the smallest things, and finding purpose in whatever you're doing, and being super, super present with it. So what I tell people is, whether I'm operating on somebody and taking out a ruptured spleen, or doing colon cancer, which everybody thinks is so important, or just unloading the dishes, or reading a book to my youngest child who still actually wants me to read a book to him, which is fantastic, or walking the dog in the rain and appreciating something very small like a hummingbird that goes by, because we have tons of hummingbirds and so we like them. It's whatever you're doing. If you can slow down enough to appreciate the feel of the dry and warm dishes on your hand, which people, I gotta unload the dishwasher. That's my 15-year-old kid, Well, I actually do it with purpose. So it's the smallest movements, how you walk through life. I have an old VW Vanagon that has a stick shift, and I love how it drives. It's slow as stink. It doesn't handle well, but it's such a good experience. And so when I drive it, I just kind of go into that Zen place of, I don't know why, but I just appreciate that every time. So it's finding purpose and meaning, even in things that we sometimes think about as chores or stuff we have to do. It's when you're stuck in traffic. You can either think of that as, oh, I'm stuck in traffic and I spend X hours a day, or I can flip on a podcast, or call my mom, call my dad, write down things that I want to get done during the day. And it doesn't mean you have to be efficient. It means that you appreciate that every door that closes is a door that opens. And it's so hard to do that. I mean, it really isn't easy. It takes practice. And I don't like the word mindful. It's not because it's just overused, but it is mindfulness. It is sort of this sense of, I don't have to change anything I'm doing right now. And I can stop avoiding the things that I have to do, and bring joy to my doing them. I don't know. If that's kind of nebulous. I hope it came across as what I was trying to say.
I thought that was beautiful. And I love when you said every door that closes is a door that opens. I mean, you could apply that to anything, and that's such a wonderful way to see the world.
Yeah, I mean, death is like that. A door has shut. The end of an existence. Well, is it?
Right.
Is it a door that's shut? Maybe it's a new relationship. Maybe you've learned how to talk to your children when somebody passes, or maybe you can apply, you grow and you evolve. And if you don't deal with these things at this moment, the beauty is that they will come up again, and you will learn and you'll have another chance. So you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to evolve every time you go to the paint store and have to look at 1,000 paint chips and go, oh my God, I don't care what color the bathroom is. Oh my God, that's so me. But at the same time, right, you can go out with your husband or your wife and you can have a cup of coffee and you can say, this sucks. We have to pick out paint chips, but isn't it great? We can afford to pick out paint chips. I mean, we're not, we have fresh water. That's not a guilt trip on yourself, but you remember, okay, so let's have fun with it.
Yes.
Perspective.
Yes.
Perspective. And people lose perspective.
Yes.
Oh my God, they lose perspective. Oh my God, this guy cut me off in traffic. Great. Who cares? Let it go. Maybe he's on his way to get his mother out of the hospital,
Exactly. I love your optimism and enthusiasm for life that you're sharing. It's just coming through so strong in this conversation. You're definitely, glass half full, not glass half empty. And it's it's so refreshing.
You know the story about the 2 kids that are given a room full of horse poop and a shovel? They just, that story where they described my sister as the one who sat down and cried. And I'm like, start digging. I'm like, because there's got to be a horse in here somewhere.
Yeah.
You're right. Like,
oh,
okay. So that was me. And yeah, I'm the most, what would you say? Optimistic, depressed person you've ever met. I'm not depressed, but life can be hard. It's not that I'm not talking about, sort of doing the old, this is great. Like, no, your house burned down. It's not great. But it's your house. And if your kids weren't in it, that's great. Look, the dog's here with half his fur. That's great. The dog didn't die. So every time there's a tragedy, you can learn. And yes, they're tragedies. I'm not saying, ooh, let's put rose-colored glasses on. Life is hard. The other thing I think people expect is how can we just all be happy? I can't stand that. Life isn't about being happy. Happy is this over sort of, I just be happy, don't worry. It doesn't work. But being joyful and seeing everything in life as an evolution is really a way to not get bogged down by the fact that life can be hard. And that's okay.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for this conversation today. This has been wonderful. And just thanks for opening up and really sharing a lot of your, personal
One thing I want to say is, absolutely. Deborah is working on this thing called Out of the Box, which is all of Gabe's friends who are teenagers and now young adults, who are a remarkable group of very diverse people, are working on this thing where eventually it will be online. It's a interactive place where people, young men, but also young women, can talk about whatever's hard for them. And they're going to be interviewed by some pretty well-known international people to talk about death, to talk about drugs, to talk about sex, to talk about peer pressure. And so it's a totally different thing because the kids are running it. So that's one thing that if people are having a hard time, or if their teenagers are having a hard time, or if they don't know where to turn, it's going to be called Out of the Box. And I can give you Deborah's contact at the end. You guys could talk to her about that, because it's a really remarkable project where the kids are generating the stuff that they want to talk about. And it's not the adults telling kids what they should be talking about, because we don't really know, the kids know. And then the other thing is, if anybody is missing a link in their lives that they wanted to actually talk to me, if you wanted to vet that, I'd be happy to talk to somebody or to get them directed towards the right resources.
And we'll link all that up in the show notes.
Okay. Yes.
And
thank you.
Fabulous.
But I'm open to that.
Yes.
I'm open to whatever you'd like to do.
Thank you so much.
That's great.
And we appreciate all of your wisdom. And
you guys are very wise to have this type of podcast and to have a place where people can talk about hard things, good things, and bad things, this would be sort of a bad one, I guess, and to use the word and try and turn it on its ear, that the more you talk about this, the less scary it gets. You guys are brilliant for doing this podcast, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And we wish you a great rest of your trip.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll see you guys over at wherever the place is. For the stereo.
Oh, right. Yes. All right. Have a great day.
You too, guys. Bye.
Bye, Jed.
Thank you so much for listening to the Art of Living Well podcast. We are so grateful that you joined us today.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or anyone else you think may benefit from this information. We'd love for you to subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, and tag the Art of Living Well podcast on social media.
If you want more inspiration in between episodes, you can find us on social media at theartofliving_well on Instagram and Facebook, where we will share snippets from our daily lives and our journey to living well.